Hello and welcome. My name is Elena Maria Viramontes. On behalf of Cornell University's Creative Writing Program and my fellow creative writing faculty members, I am honored to introduce our MFA Graduating Poets and Fiction Writers class of 2021. We are taking a diversion from our normal in-person celebratory reading events and invite you virtually to share in the voices of this closely knit group. These writers have distinguished themselves both locally and globally in their labors to summon new possibilities of language and storytelling. An influential, creative, and loving group, their voices represent another vision of the world, another potential and sustaining perspective of reality, at once painfully truthful and benevolent. Here's to the MFA class of 2021.
I'm going to be reading 4 poems for you today. The first of which is a tiny poem, at least compared to my others, and it's part of a larger series of smaller poems that for now are just called entries. So this is entry 1. What is the function of a half-dream, of a tongue? Today my cat is castle-sized, lapping up cow's milk discarded in the river. My cat is made of fire and a lost heart, the river running cataract milky, UTI piss milky. I wish I was a clever tailor. I wish I had a cat. A bit of context for this next poem. I lost my grandmother in late spring of 2019, and soon after that, I visited the Philippines for the first time to be with family and to be there for her funeral. And then I headed to Cornell a few months later, and so this is one of several poems that tries to reckon with the different emotions I was going through at that time. So this is called When All the Empty Smudges of the Room Are Turning into One Big Sleepy Cricket. It's quiet in this busy room. When you close your eyes and let the shapes swim, who are they? What dialect of longing do your closed eyelids speak? To say yes in Tagalog, all you need to do is create an O sound twice. Oo, I say, because I can say little else. Oo, I am Reynaldo's daughter. Oh, I am Narlisa's granddaughter. My only fluent language here is made of salt water and fleeing. From the eyes, you can see or not see, the same way a stray dog carries rabies or it doesn't. After 9 days, we find our way to the cemetery, where we throw white flowers toward the displaced soil. O shallow cup of my grieving, you are gawky and overdone. I hope you overflow and rot the chapel floorboards. O skinny dog pining for scraps among the mourners, I offer you a bite of Chopin, a morsel of yes. This poem is called A Place So Still, Not Even the Wind Will Go There. And that title is a line borrowed from the poem That Which Cannot Be Stilled by Natalie Diaz from her 2020 collection, Postcolonial Love Poem. So, yeah, a place so still, not even the wind can go there. My mother asks, how are you feeling today? And a mulberry tree sprouts from my throat. It's not about bad or good. The silkworms have to eat. And did you know they lost the ability to fly hundreds of years ago? Their ancestors' wings bred into dysfunction. And the mulberries were plump in the schoolyard of my childhood, falling from a tree that once sprouted in the yard of a convent. Those leaves are feral in my chest, and the silkworms nibbling them into doilies. Foil me, I want to say. I'm all of a spooked horse waiting for the one useful hush. I want to say there are snakes here, and no consensus on their evil or goodness. I'm getting mixed messages, my chest a tangled silver chain. So many mothers have tried to tell the story of compounding miseries. We don't remember that the thread gets severed each time before any moral can emerge. We don't remember why our bodies seem to refuse us when we need them most. In truth, there never was a tree at my throat, but perhaps some kind of seed, some kind of ghost. My mother asks questions, tries her best, like every mother does. I try to mother silk moths by simply allowing them to break open their own cocoons. I keep them in a shoebox in my bedroom. After all these years, they haven't yet recovered their flight, but it doesn't stop them from trying. At night, my room the opacity of a thick gray wool. I hear the steady drumbeat gallop of their bodies. Without light source nor unfaulty wings, I listen as they reach out, open-hearted, to one another. So this last poem is a newer poem. It was especially challenging because I've always had a grudge against love poems for some reason, and I kind of see this as my first earnest love poem. But sometimes I think the things that feel the most risky to say or share tend to be the most important, if only for like myself or yourself. So this is called Moth Glow, and it is for Michael. I'll lay down my edges on the dune of you, the way your music drifts in through windows, alights, blood warm at my neck. Here it is, all cabbagekin textile. Here the wallpaper, a home ripe for haunting. Vaccines help the body learn to reckon with the unknown, which is to say I'm glad I adopted the cat last year. Candle flame her love, the vaccine, for a more decadent burning. To say I'm glad I met you twice. You're the implausible ice my eye catches on. You're the bog that may kill me slowly and keep me smiling for 9,000 years. My secret plan is to melt you, I'm sorry. You hurt me like a song that's too good. And I would sharpen my teeth if it meant I could gnaw the between of us into a shape less earthsea. I wish for you to never alter your Dunishness. I wish us both a brackish new year. Thank you.
This is an excerpt from my novel, Mule. Nobody had ever given me anything before, so I didn't care that the car was a piece of shit. I didn't care that it was a two-timer, twice handed down, first from our old squad leader to Davis, and now from Davis to me. It was a fucking car, and it was free. To tell the truth, I actually liked that I knew its last two owners, had deployed with them. That made me feel like a legacy. I was 2 weeks out of the army and growing a beard, but the years I put in were already looking like they stood for more, and I had the car to prove it. I hadn't known how to thank Davis, so I just asked, "Seriously?" "It's time to pass it on," Davis said. I said it always had looked like a drug dealer's car, and Davis told me to be careful going to work for Ronnie. I drove Davis back to Fort Lewis and dropped him off outside our old barracks. He smacked the hood of the car goodbye, and then I headed north up I-5 to my grandma's house. I used to visit her on weekends when I was stationed at Lewis. On Saturday mornings, I'd hold her under the arm as she shuffled across the street to Congregation Orva Shalom. It took 10 minutes for us to make the trip, me holding my hand out to stop traffic, horns bleeding, and my little grandma's breathy voice saying, "Oh, shut it," to the cars. While she prayed, I'd smoke and read on her back porch until the service was over, and I had to walk back and hold up traffic again just to help her home. I'd ridden in the car plenty, not just since Davis owned it, but back when our old squad leader did too. Once a month, we'd skip morning PT and pack into a booth at a diner and eat omelets and potatoes and pancakes with whipped cream until we could barely walk. I was the one who started calling the car the Atheist due to its bumper stickers. God doesn't kill people. People with gods kill people. Stuff like that. There was one about liking dogs more than humans too, but when Davis got the car after we came back from OEF in 2010, he covered most of the anti-God stickers with the Ole Miss football ones. Davis used to sign a cross over his chest rig every time we went outside the wire, and our squad leader would tease him, say to Davis he was the only religious person he liked. At some point, before Davis got the car, someone keyed "In God We Trust" into the driver door. The car was a 1999 Saturn, and its black paint had faded to pigeon gray. And when I pressed the pedal all the way to the floor, not much more would happen besides a heavy rumble as though the engine was going into cardiac arrest. When I pulled up to my grandma's house, she said she couldn't believe Davis had given it to me. She was happy for me. She never did like the way I drove her Crown Vic over speed bumps in her neighborhood, but I could tell she didn't like the look of the Saturn. She lived so close to the synagogue, I don't think she wanted her rabbi to see that heap of junk parked in her driveway. My grandma wanted to know why Davis gave me the car. I told her, "It's a legacy thing, Grandma," and I tried to tell her how Davis had got it as a gift from a guy we both used to serve under, and how now Davis was passing it on to me. I think a car was too much for her to understand, even if it was just a piece of shit Saturn. My dad always talked about how her growing up in the Depression shaped everything she did. "That's why Grandma has 3 freezers in the basement," he'd say. "That's why she cuts coupons. That's why she'll drive across town for gas that's 2 cents cheaper." "Your grandfather used to give you cash when he was alive," my grandmother said, as I was finally on my way out the door. "I remember," I said. "I put a 20 in the top pocket of your bag." "You didn't have to do that," I said, and I thought about the stacks of money Ronnie had last texted a picture of, how he had told me there was that and more waiting to be earned. In my last month in the Army, all I'd been able to think about was getting out, smoking, and working side by side with my old friend. Ronnie had been in California working with his brother Bitz for 4 years. He left Georgia not too long after I shipped out, and though we kept in touch, I didn't know much about how much money he was really making. I'd imagined him selling ounces, a half pound maybe, way more than he used to growing up. But then in one phone call, when I mentioned that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after my contract was up, Ronnie offered me the job. He asked if I had a clean driving record. I said, "Sure do," and asked what the work was like. I gave him my address, and he sent me a burner. I felt like a criminal as soon as I flipped it open. The feeling was exciting. It was similar to the feeling I'd had when I was first issued a rifle, and I wondered how this next gig would compare. The Army was nothing like what I thought it'd be, even though, looking back, I've had a hard time remembering what I was thinking when I signed away 4 years of my life. The phone buzzed, and I opened the message, and a picture of a coffee table covered in stacks of cash appeared. Those old phones were shit for resolution, but I figured there must have been 50 grand on the table. The next text said, "We had a good month." I wrote back, "Just tell me where to sign." I kissed my grandma on the cheek, then I got in the Atheist and raced down I-5 headed south. When I passed my old base's main entrance, I gave the finger to the red-brown sign that read Fort Lewis, home of the 7th Infantry Division. I drove with one earbud in and listened to Slaughterhouse-5. I thought about stopping in Portland to see the river, but Ronnie was waiting, and I still had 6 hours to go. I was thrilled to have a car to contribute to Ronnie and his brother's business, and I wondered right then, heading south, looking over the cab of a car I'd ridden in plenty but never driven, if my getting out of the Army was all about ownership, what a guy could take and what could be taken away. I'd had to turn in everything I thought was mine, a rucksack I carried through Afghanistan, pouches which held my compass and cigarettes, extra tourniquets, my laundry bag with my initials stenciled on the canvas, and a weapons cleaning kit permanently black with carbon. Even my uniforms. The supply clerk looked over my gear and handed me a bill. He said I was missing a helmet cover and spare shoelaces, and that I owed $41.68. I gave those to guys that needed them, I said, and the clerk replied, "You can pay by phone later."
Billy Joel says, sometimes a fantasy is all you need. The first time I tried smoking, I couldn't get the thing lit. It was too cold outside, my fingers were numb, and no one was in sight. The dark was cool enough to drink. Each star was an ice cube. I had fizzy pop wine eyes and fish lips ready to kiss a stranger. I pretended to smoke that cigarette at 10 o'clock in the middle of a hollow park. I took drags long enough to fake coat my entire body black with nicotine. I imagined the warmth of its slender white body perched between my fingers like a pigeon to a ledge, warming what fingers were left from the cold. I pretended I was in Paris, waiting for Baptiste or Francois to saunter down the Champs-Élysées with a scarf wrapped around his thick neck, tucked into his leather moto jacket. He would have a chocolate ganache tart with roasted strawberries from one of the local patisseries in his left hand. His right hand would balance a cigarette between his thumb and pointer finger. We would exchange in a long drag of a kiss, one where no one tries to decipher whose mouth starts or ends where. We would taste like ashes, but that's okay, because that's what we've been reduced to. We'd find a bench and we'd feed each other with tangy fingers and take drags of each other's cigarette, excited to be where the other's mouth had been. Sugar and cigarette smoke paint the night fishnet, lit by those ice cube stars, brandy night sky, he'd whisper, "Jetez-vous, jetez-vous, jetez-vous." I'd say, "I want you to. Exhaling what's left of a declining cigarette, and I lean into him. And in that hollow park, I began to feel my fingers again.
This is an excerpt from my Untitled novel. After Sujung's son died, her nightmares intensified. Fistfuls of hair tore loose from her head, with no more resistance than petals being plucked from a rose. Her Bible study leader recommended an exclusive healing spa in Pyeongchang-dong. Sujung had never heard of it, although she and her husband lived in the neighborhood. It was a quiet enclave in the mountains, where she could hear everything. The housekeeper's hips creaking as she polished the banister, her husband's arrhythmic heartbeat as he slept in front of the muted television. She could hear the thin shrill of evaporating dew when the sun leaned over the mountain in the mornings, yellowing the garden with light. Sujung occupied herself by recording her dreams in a meticulous archival fashion. She logged them into her phone as voice memos when she woke up, then transcribed them into a large hardcover logbook. Her own sleepy voice kept her company while she drank coffee and wrote in the dining room. There was just one dream that she omitted from her logs, since it recurred so frequently. A strand of her black hair that soaked in the bathtub overnight like a noodle in water, until it bloated into the size of a human. Leaning over the edge of the tub, unable to get a grasp on it, unsure how to stop it from thrashing. "The spa is invitation only," the Bible study leader, Mrs. Lee, said modestly. "They don't have another opening until May. My driver can take you there now if you're free. It was a great help to me." Mrs. Lee looked down at her folded hands to indicate that she wouldn't press the matter further. Sujung nodded. The media had been vicious to Mrs. Lee's family when her daughter, a famous actress, died by suicide a few years ago. Thank you, Sujung said. Yes, I would like that. Here, Mrs. Lee said, placing a heavy white marble the size of a gumball into Sujung's palm. The number 2 was inlaid in mother of pearl, as well as a mother of pearl band, thin as a strand of hair, around the circumference. Give them this. They will know you are with me. In the car, Sujung felt a ripple of uneasiness. She had felt this way once before on the way to her son's funeral. Her large family had loaded onto a tour bus, the only vehicle that could accommodate them all. Her son in a coffin in the luggage compartment below. For a paralyzing moment, Sujung had believed that they were taking the coffin back home, that everyone would spray tears for her son across their living room carpet as his waxy face darkened in the shadow of the mountain. The spa was located on top of a steep hill, not far from where Sujung lived. The domed walls and roof appeared to be made of a single, unbroken mass of rippled glass, like a large overturned contact lens. The sky was now a deep blue, the shade of blue that her son used to say made it feel like he was standing on the floor of the ocean. She lifted the white marble to her eye, almost touching the iridescent mother of pearl to her cornea, then extended her arm so it floated in the center of a street lamp's golden halo, a new moon. The metal gate buzzed and unlocked as Sujung approached it. She glanced up and saw a black CCTV nestled in the pine boughs above her. A long beam of light extended towards her like an arrow and then vanished as a door in the distance opened and closed. A figure joined her in the cool garden, heavy fabric robes rustling, pebbles crunching underfoot as they approached. Hello, Mrs. Kwan. The tallest woman Sujung had ever seen smiled down at her, her face illuminated by a candle suspended from a tree branch, so that she appeared to be a floating head in the dark. I'm Uri. We are so pleased to care for you today. Would you like to join me inside? Sujung nodded and surprised herself by taking Uri's outstretched hand. Sujung was disappointed to find that, inside the dome, the main building was an ordinary brick and wood mansion like her own. Uri handed Sujung a black velvet case that hinged open like a jewelry box and contained a digital tablet loaded with welcome manuals, maps, and daily menus. This shows that my stay is for a long time, Sujung said, scrolling through the itinerary of spa treatments, guided meditation sessions, and massages, unable to reach the end of it. Yes, Mrs. Lee's membership is unlimited. You are our guest for as long or as short a stay as you wish, Uri said, with an almost undetectable hesitation. She smiled in a way that suggested Sujung was being a little ungrateful. Well, just for one night to start then, Sujung said. I think I'll explore the grounds alone. She lifted the tablet to show that she was all set. Uri bowed her head and left. Sujung ran her fingers through her hair. When the strands fell, she could hear them land on the marble with the dry rustle. When her son was little, he thought that her hair grew longer if you pulled on it, as though there was an endless knitted spool of it beneath the surface of the skin. It was silent. Then, birdsong, gentle trickle of water, some hushed laughter from above, a soundscape released as though on a conductor's cue. Dark storefronts for nail salons and jewelry shops occupied the first floor. The layout was almost identical to the ground floor of her own home. In that corner, where Sujung read the newspaper in her Eames chair, was a rotating display of painted acrylic nails. Over there, where her son and husband had watched soccer games together, a monitor with the slideshow advertising gold facials and whole-body snail mucin baths. Sujung wandered through the building aimlessly at first, stepping into waiting elevators, pressing floor numbers without looking, drifting down dim hallways in her bare feet. She noted a pleasant, scented humidity in the air and was guided by the sound of splashing water to what she assumed was the bathhouse. A warm mist seeped from behind a black velvet curtain. When she pulled it back, she stood face to face with the glowing room number 2, affixed to a white door. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Looking up, she saw a large peephole, the size of her moon marble. When she held the marble in front of the peephole to compare their sizes, the marble was suctioned in. It clattered down a series of melodious metal gears and thunked into place, unlocking the door. The room was so dark that Sujung could not tell if her eyes were open or closed.
These poems are dedicated to my great-grandmother, Christina, Yaya X, and to every Yaya, past, present, future. Little Alps of Grief. Toddler bolt upright, I collect what I desire into a fiery red beach pail. 10 hermit crab shells in muddy brine. Yaya, this is the stew that lives inside me. Overnight, the pail stinks up the veranda, so you rinse its guts out with rose water. Each crustacean, a tear on its 2 travels, in and out. That July, saline pools crack open in my sleep. When I dream, ancestral back channels multiply like Madreporian coral. Your memory migrating polyps across my skull. To our surprise, we wake to find the dead crabs have reincarnated as flies, shitting over freshly dried nightgowns. I pretend I'm the goddess Miakoris and peel iridescent defecation off each visible surface. Our 80s futon, Banayia's icon, black and white linoleum. Shall I call this our Easter egg hunt of transmigration? Droppings mushroomed around the caves of your eyes, a fairy ring for death to dance its circles. What I want now, I wanted then. My tongue on your knees. Yaya, to stir up the blood's incognito business. Your knees, stupendous little Alps of grief. Here and here, a bluff to vamoose off, like a wet pup through the doggy door to Euphrates. The Great Salt Lick, a brief history. Yaya X and I attend the Great Salt Lick in Baker City, Oregon, where cow-stroked salt blocks get auctioned off as art. In the main showroom, I point to a block shaped like a purple knuckle, then to another, a blown-up eardrum. Yaya hovers over, lips apart. I was born in the Pontic Greek village of Salut. At night, my heart's 4-chambered stomach purled like a boiling well. After wedlock, all speech was a stone. Father-in-law granted, good bride sucked on. In Salut, fathers christened their calves, spotted girl and little bride, while mothers ground their sighs into flour for meat pies. At 18, I became an all-you-can-lick salt buffet, my entire life stiff-caressed by slobbery organs of dung-perfumed men. No one knew it then. In the cupboards, I mouthed syllables like a poltergeist at rush hour. All the good silverware thrown aside and glistening, spitted breath rising in a proving drawer. Abecedarian picnic with Yaya X at Blood Falls. Antarctica, an aftermath of snow and ancient seawater. By Blood Falls, it's not hard to imagine Charon, angel of death, approaching on a gondola made of Anatolian bones. Do you see him? Yaya asks, snacking on a hazelnut eclair in her frost-nipped coat. There, waving hello before rowing down the rusty flow into Victoria Land. On our tongues, glaciofluvial droplets condense in wispy bows. I stare down the hole engineers bore into Taylor Glacier with a probe called Ice Mole and catch the dead blowing kisses. They say soon we'll move to Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, should microbial studies of subsurface kingdoms prove fruitful. If you looked at a brine sample under a microscope, Marinobacter bacteria resemble your ancestors' naked features. We watch generations cluster beneath our heads, one into the other like polycrystalline. From them, you've inherited rows of quicksilver teeth, Yaya says, your blood a pointy Rubik's Cube the dead fiddle with. Consider you are the spectral information in a sound thundering off one woman to the next. Consider the wound, like a whale, has a larynx for seeing. The eye of your uvula is the eye of your mother's uvula. Her mouth a burning door with a grape for a knob. Victresses of echo. In this field of snow, we knock our voices on ice-hot xyloid. Yeah. I want to carve a funeral with my throat, but best for now to yell into the glacier hole. Best my vowels coil off zeptoseconds, as tiny as 50 microliters, the volume of a single drop of water. Song in Perpetuity. This poem was originally published in Grist, a Journal of the Literary Arts, issue 12, and has since then been slightly revised. Past the mirror and past the mirror of waking life, the sprockets have begun their irreparable way. Breathlessly alive, in my chill green tub, Yaya X addresses some half-on intercom to the afterlife. I sit and watch as one does on a Ferris wheel consorting with the clemency of thereafter. Thus far, static of 1,000 twangling instruments like ballistic moonlight. I don't know much about tenderness, but I play along. Cup the small of her thumb to my ear, and have now begun readying myself like a whirling dervish. Before words, Yaya felt out her soul's creasework, with angel hair down to here. There was no dream, swung open and swung to again. Dare bright and illegible, only hands, are you listening? Death was a door, marked livelier sleep, wide awake and full of people. The breath of days lost no time and went on humming for the dusk-ribbed earth like a carnation in a silver bottle. I am trying to tell you, when you go, pour yourself into the dirt, filling nowhere, big and black as luck. Shrink into the shape of a bent spoon and imagine crowds crying above you, hired as professional weepers to taper God's exhaustion. I promise to place a lamp in the oval hands of gratitude. The monstrous song of its glow would provide a means for you to find me, exquisite as rattled snow off a satchel of fleece. Do not turn away from mereness. Even now, at the opening of you, Rosebud with unknown name pricks up her ears. Thank you.